Hello, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host of Fiberchats. Love having you on my channel. And today my guest is Romi Hill. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such an honor. I must tell you, I'm so excited about our chat. So we interacted on Instagram a little bit, and we have some stuff in common, like our boys modeling the shawls, and I think that's how
Yes.
we first connected. And I'm gonna come back to that, but I want to start with your yesterday's post. So yesterday you posted about Acts of Kindness, which is the new package of designs that you announced, and that's going basically like happening from now till February, right?
Yes.
End of February. Um, and you mentioned in that post that you've been struggling with mental health issues, that these little gifts and little projects is something that easier to handle right now with like everything that's going on. And it like really resonated with me because I was interviewing somebody else recently and I just said that like I feel like 2020 specifically, like with COVID and everything, it was so hard for me. Like I love knitting lace. I love knitting Shetland lace, and it was very difficult for me to knit Shetland lace. It was very difficult for me to concentrate on something that takes weeks or months. I wanted something simple. I wanted thicker yarn. I wanted something like quick in and out sort of thing. Was that the idea, like the same idea for this package that you created?
Yes. I think a lot of things went into it. So I've always kind of struggled with mental health issues. I just I have a tendency to just sort of go in my head and, you know, think that I'm not worthy and I don't matter. And so it's just started kind of happening in early 2017, and I would sort of pull myself out of it and then sort of go back in. And then the pandemic has been, I mean, there's the pandemic, and then there's also all the issues that are kind of associated with it. And I just found I just felt really isolated because I live kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And so um, I have actually I had on my schedule to travel every month to teach in 2020. And I was kind of excited about seeing knitters and kind of getting out there and talking to people. And then all of that went away. And I just sort of like I just felt despair. And I felt kind of, at the same time, I felt really bad about feeling despair because I have it so much better than so many people. So, I mean, I don't really have anything to complain about because living out in the middle of nowhere means that, I have a place to be. It was always safe. I was able to get curbside delivery, all this stuff. And, um, and I just felt it was hard to feel like I had to do my part by staying home and doing nothing because I'm kind of a fixer. So I just I was just depressed, and I started just giving people small things. Like I actually gave someone some toilet paper,
Oh, that
and
might have
I
been a really good gift in 2020.
and I gave out dried sourdough starter, and I would send yarn to friends, and it made me feel so much better, especially like I see the bread that people have baked from the sourdough starter.
Right.
And then, and I just felt like, I mean, I just can't handle making a lot of larger things. So I thought, okay, well, those little sachets that you can get off of Amazon.com, they have lavender in them. And I just never really liked the bag because it seemed really impersonal. And so I designed this little embellished bag, and it made me really feel good to, I gave one to my son, and it just made me feel really good. And so I thought, you know, I want to share that with everybody. Like I just want to share with people the gift of giving other people small things and tiny projects, like whatever you can handle at the moment. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but just like, hey, I'm thinking about you, and here's a little tiny thing that I made just for you. So
I also think like the fact that it's your designs, it makes it very special because you have like very sophisticated designs.
oh,
You have
thank
like
you.
difficult shawls, you have, I mean, so there's like a lot of going on, even like all your sweaters. It it looks intimidating to like a beginner. And this project sort of allows people to say, "Oh, I made Romi Hill's design," like to start because, and it's interesting because I always find it funny. Like I have a bunch of people who tell me, "Well, I'm not ready for lace yet. I only need socks." And I say, "Well, you'll be surprised to know that I knitted Shetland lace, but I only last week knitted my first pair of socks because I was intimidated by socks." So we all have
That's
these
funny.
like phobias, of like fear of unknown. And we always like we see something and we're like, "Oh, that looks difficult." And I noticed that there's like a lot of designers, they would create something and they would say, "This is like really for the adventurous beginner. It's a simple technique. It might look difficult, but it's simple." And people don't believe that,
I
you know?
have noticed that a lot. I mean, some things that I think, some of my patterns that I think are actually really simple, people are intimidated by, and others that I think are actually more difficult, but they look really simple. People are drawn to those, and I say, but this one's actually easier. I mean, it looks really impressive, but it's actually easier than this one that you chose.
Right.
So yeah, I totally relate.
Well, let's talk about your designs a little bit. So you were very crafty, like always, right? You were crafty as a little child and you crocheted
Yeah.
first.
I did. Yeah, I grew up in a crocheting family. So my mother and my grandmother raised me, and they were crocheters. So I had to beg my mother to teach me how to knit. And
What about knitting attracted you? Like why? Because I notice it a lot. Like with people who crochet, they think of knitting as like something else, like some different art. Like what about knitting attracted you?
I just love the look of knitted fabric. So I loved, like, I just fell in love with the look of stockinette stitch fabric, basically. Just like all the knits, and it's so smooth and it drapes. And crochet is great for many things, but it doesn't really drape. So I just wanted to knit myself a sweater, basically. So yeah, I just, nothing against crochet because I still use it. It's just that I just, there's something about the way that fabric looked so neat and tidy, and all the stitches lining up.
Right. So what,
So
like you did crochet, you did knitting, you did metal work, you did macrame, you did embroidery, I think, like from all
mm,
I've heard about you.
and beading. So
And
I love
yeah. Do you
beading. Yeah.
combine all of this now? Like, do you ever think about how you're gonna put like all those skills into, I mean, maybe not all of them, but like, do you like to combine different medias?
I do. I actually have an old book called Elements of Style Knit and Crochet Jewelry. I think it's with fiber felt and beads, something like that. It was a really long title. So
Hard to remember.
anyway, yeah, so I had a lot of stuff in there that was combined. So like I crocheted and knitted with wire and beads, and I had some metal work in there. And it was it was very fun to do, but I think most people who knit love the feeling of fiber in their hands, like that really soft, wonderful wool. And people don't love working with metal so much, like to knit and crochet, because it's not soft.
Right.
So so I just sort of I sort of put that aside a little bit and did more just nice, soft, fibery, wonderful things. So
So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about people out there. So when you design, do you consider people out there? Do you go by what you think people want, but what you think people would buy, or by your artistic inspiration of the moment?
so I've thought about this a lot. And I was a graphic designer before I did knitting, and I look at it a little bit like graphic design. So you're presented with a problem to solve, like in the world. So it's not like you're thinking up a work of art where the sky's the limit and you can decide to put anything on the paper or use any type of medium or anything. It's like you have a specific problem. So, like, I presented to myself the specific problem of something that people would want to wear and would also have an enjoyable time knitting. So, because I think that knitting is, I mean, it's definitely product oriented in that you want to be able to use whatever it is that you've worked on, but also for a lot of people, it's the process. And sometimes that's even more important. So I try, like, for myself, I like puzzles and I like just playing with things. So if I went out there and tried to put out patterns like I would be interested in, it would be, you know, all these weird techniques and different things that I'm not sure would be as enjoyable. So I definitely think about, well, if I put this technique in, are people going to like doing it? Like, is it going to ruin the rhythm of it, or is it going to enhance the rhythm of it? Is there another way that I can do it so it would make it easier or more enjoyable? Is there a material or colors or something that I could use just to make it as enjoyable an experience as possible?
Right.
So I guess I take inspiration from my surroundings and everything, but then I sort of also have that set of criteria that I go back to.
Well, I notice in your photography, like you take a lot of pictures of the surrounding areas, and you live in a beautiful place with like mountains and like wild nature, and you also do camping and like all that stuff. So when
Mhm.
you take pictures, do you get inspired by nature, like as far as coming up with the patterns?
I do. I do. So I have an incredible view. It's actually more burned than it was because we almost got burned out this past summer. So like the whole mountain that I look out on in my studio is burned now. But um, but I do like when I see different colors and the different textures and um, just the area is incredibly beautiful. And I'm not sure whether I take a direct inspiration from it or it's just like it clears my mind and lets my mind just sort of wander, which is really nice. And then my mind just kind of starts putting things together. So I guess it's more of an indirect inspiration rather than directly looking at a tree and putting a tree in my design or something like that.
Right. Well, let's talk about that fire. So you're in like after 2020, right? That was bad enough. You are battling depression, that's bad enough. You're going to your kid's graduation and your tire pops and you like you basically have to like do a sale just to get money to get to the kid's graduation. And then you basically have to vacate your home because the whole area is burning. How do you find that silver lining? How do you find like that energy to pop out of it and like say, it's not personal, it's not like that, everything goes wrong in my life, it just one of those things happen category and I just have to be positive. How do you still stay positive?
So this sounds like really corny, I think, but I kind of look at myself as really lucky because like our axle broke and and the tire did and the wheel did not go flying off into rush hour traffic in Chicago. Like that's when it broke in rush hour traffic in Chicago. And we didn't get in an accident and nobody got hurt. And that we found somebody who could fix it. And so it's just like, I felt like that was a really close call that we got through. And then definitely, you know, at the beginning of summer, I looked at the mountain behind our house and I was like, you know, if a fire starts over there, so California is like right over the mountain from us. We're like 5 minutes from the border. And I just thought, okay, if the fire starts up there, California is so overwhelmed by all the fires that they're not able to like suppress them as quickly as they do in Nevada. So I kind of looked at it at the beginning of summer and I said, you know, we're dead if a fire starts back there. And then it did. So um but we weren't really close to it. So we were able to pack up all the things that we wanted to take with us. Like I was able to take all the photographs and important papers and things, you know, that we could carry in the car that was whatever was important. And there were people who weren't, like it started burning and they just had to run. So, you know, it was hard to say goodbye because we thought we were saying goodbye. And we just figured that it was gone because we were looking at our neighborhood burning on a video. And but they saved it. I mean,
Right.
so like it's at this point, I think more like survivor's guilt in a way. I mean, there were people who lost everything. And I feel like we just are so lucky. So I don't know. I know what could happen, but it just means so much more to me now. Like every little bit of luck where we get through something, it's, I just try to enjoy it and like enjoy every moment of good things that happen because life is cyclical and it could turn bad at any time. So I just want that to kind of carry with me and keep with me in case something bad happens.
When you were packing that evacuation truck, right? Was it difficult to decide what you take with you and what you don't? Like, were you surprised that anything that you took that you suddenly understood very necessary for you to take with you?
Um, it wasn't as difficult this time because in 2017 we had to evacuate and it was the first time we had to evacuate. So like we were in Nevada where I live, there are no mandatory evacuations. So they gave us a warning and we didn't realize that that meant we should leave. So we had like all of the stuff packed away in 2 cars and we are just kind of like, you know, trying to go about our business, driving around. Like we sent our son to school and picked him up from his cross country meet and all this stuff. And so I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to take and what I didn't. And um, the rest of it I took videos of. So I just took things that are irreplaceable.
So
Um,
yarn didn't make it onto that truck.
so all of my knitted samples did.
I love that.
Yeah, so all of my knitted things made it on there, and instruments, like I have my mother's old clarinet, and I have my French horn from um, I mean, it's older than I am. And then my son's instruments and like all of my computer equipment, my hard drive, basically.
Right. So you were also a musician, like growing up. You always played French horn, right?
I did, yeah.
Do you feel like it's similar, like music and crafts? Like, do you think it's the same sort of creative thing? Because music is like, I mean, and I'll explain you why I asked, because my son is also a musician. And we had,
Yes, he's amazing.
thank you.
He's so good.
We had that whole discussion. So one time he was playing at the concert in the retirement community. So when he was in high school, it was like once a month, basically. He was playing in different retirement communities, and you would meet all the people there, like who are members there. And some of them were amazing musicians in their life, like when they were younger. So this one older gentleman came to my son afterwards, and he said, I was in a jazz band, and I loved how you played, and I wish you would start composing. And that spiraled the whole
Interesting.
discussion of like what makes one a composer versus a performer. And when I started to knit, at some point, like people were like encouraging me to try designing. And I was talking to my husband about it, and he said, well, there is Rachmaninoff who wrote the second concerto, and then there is, Horowitz who played it better than anybody else, better than Rachmaninoff could ever play. So you can be a designer or you can be a performer. And I never thought about it that way. But do you think like being a performer, being a musician, and being a designer, like how do you see yourself? Are you the Horowitz or Rachmaninoff?
Um, I think I think I am like a DJ in a way. So adding a lot of my own self into the mix, but getting inspiration from all over. So, stitch patterns and stitch dictionaries, and I get inspiration from fashion and from my surroundings and everything, and I put it all into my own sort of thing. So, but that is a really interesting question. I've had a lot of conversations about that with several people because I used to hang out with composers in music school. And so I've had a lot of interesting conversations. And I think a lot of times people are impressed by performers, but they're more impressed by the composer. And without a really good performer, the composer is nothing. And so I feel like it's more of a symbiotic relationship than I think a lot of people feel. I mean, performers put so much of themselves into the
Right.
work.
And it's funny
So,
because, like, a lot of when you listen to different musicians performing the same exact piece, you see
mhm,
how different they are. There's like no two performances that are the same. They
no,
play the same music, but it's completely different.
yes. There's the technical, and then there is that
So,
essence. Yeah, exactly. The soul that goes into it, and it makes it completely different.
so now that we talked about music, let's talk about the boys. So the first time we actually had like somewhat lengthy interaction was over the fact that you posted a picture of your son wearing one of your shawls, and then you noticed that there was a departure of quite a few followers on Instagram. And you
Yep.
question like, was it because of the model or like what was going on? And because I use my son, I mean, I don't use my son, but my son loves to model. My dad
Totally
loves
know
to
what you
model
mean.
my son.
Yeah.
Right. I don't use anybody. I offer them, I ask, they agree. I don't force anybody into modeling for me, but they love actually modeling shawls specifically. And they make it look so much fun. Like the same shawl, if I would stand there and hold that shawl, it's very pretty shawl. When my son flexes his muscles with that same shawl, it just makes it much more fun of a picture. Um, and I'm not even like, I'm not trying to sell them, but I'm sort of selling the image of the shawl right on Instagram. So there is some sort of marketing going on in that respect. How did it start? What do you remember the first time putting a shawl on one of your kids?
Yes. So my younger son has always been way more helpful and supportive. Like my older son, um, never really wanted to help me out in my business or anything, but my younger son was always like, "Oh yeah, I'll help you out." So I never really asked my older son to model things because he didn't want to. So like I didn't want to make him feel bad. So I used to just kind of ask my son to model, my younger son to model things, and I wouldn't show his face. And and then when he got older, um, he used to have long hair. And then when he got older and he really wanted to cut it off, so I gave him a haircut. And he like he liked my shawls. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe he might want to model them. And he agreed. And I think the first one that I showed on him that was lace was Radiance. And before then, I had taken pictures of him in ones that didn't have any lace on them. And I kind of noticed, like, I thought it was a really good shot. And just like from a fashion standpoint and from a composition, and he was getting to be a much better model and everything. And like, I didn't get very much like positive from it. Like, I didn't get many likes and I lost some followers. And I thought, oh, this is really weird. And I just thought, oh, maybe it's the Instagram algorithm. And I have to do something to figure out the algorithm. So I would do other things. And he really wanted to be a model. And it's just something he's interested in, fashion and modeling and fitness and stuff. And so I started taking pictures of him, and some of them were because he thought he might want to send in headshots and other stuff. So I just said, "Hey, would you like to model these things?" And I thought we came up with some really good shots, but I didn't get much of a positive reaction. And then it was basically just frustration. I mean, I posted one day and I lost a bunch of followers, and I just went over to Twitter in frustration and said, what is the big deal? Why do people care so much? Like, I can't believe it's this big a deal. And then I kind of started finding more people who thought that that was ridiculous, that men look great in shawls, which is really
Well,
nice.
and
But
the funny part, it's not only that men look great in shawls, but that historically men always wore shawls. Like you can look into like Renaissance painting and see men in prayer shawls. Like I mean,
yes,
the whole idea of prayer shawl exists, right, for like hundreds of years, and
yes,
it's interesting that it's more of the U.S. thing because when I talk to like other guys in Europe, they're surprised that it's an issue.
yes,
So it's mostly like locally based sort of superstition that like men should not wear lace. Men like if you look at the old pictures where men have all those like sleeves with lace, I mean lace was
right,
like totally manly. Nobody was questioning the manhood if they were lace. It was like wealth. It was showing of wealth, not
right,
of femininity.
right. And high heels too, and
Right.
all sorts of, I mean, it was a
Needs.
sign of elegance and wealth. And I think the US has some really weird ideas of manliness. Um, and it's just so strange sometimes to see it out in the open. Like these are mostly women who are unfollowing me.
That's
I
true.
mean,
That's
I
actually
don't think
interesting.
men really had that much of a problem with it.
Right.
Like men were like, oh, he looks great, that's so awesome. And it's women who've written to me and said, you're feminizing your son, and why don't you knit him a pocket square or a necktie or something like that? And I mean, these are women who are saying this. So it's
Well, I have
women who
another
are,
question though. What was his reaction to that? When he was putting that shawl, how did his friends react?
um, no one, no one cares. I mean, so my younger son he makes whatever he does cool. He's just one of those
Very,
people who is like,
very cool.
okay, I'm going to do this and it's great because I'm doing it. And so, and he had a bunch of friends. At the time he was at a performing arts boarding high school, and his friends were just, they'd wear different types of clothes, like they try on each other's clothes. He had lots of female friends, and they wore each other's clothes, and so everybody, pretty much his friend group was like, what is the big deal?
Right.
But then on the other hand, where we actually live, it's it's much more parochial, like much more of a, like, that whole rigid idea of masculine and feminine, and what men wear and what women wear, and the roles are like that, just really set in stone, kind of like traditional
Right.
roles. So I think if he were still in this area when this whole thing had happened, he might not have been talking to his friends about it. But his group of friends, they're from all over the US. They're all artists of some type, like musicians and dancers and actors. So they're just like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
It looks great on you.
It actually does. He's like very sassy and like in his shots and like so full of like attitude and like free. Like I mean, I love all his pictures. I'm like huge fan of.
He owns it. It's so much fun to shoot him. I just have so much fun doing it.
Right.
It's such a cool project.
So, what are you working on now? What's in the works?
So, so I have my serialized ebook. So we were talking about that earlier, and those are the small projects from scraps. And I'm about to have an autumn knit along, and that's it behind me here.
Yeah.
So probably by the time this is up, I will have released the knit along, and that's gonna start October 20th. Um, I am gonna do a club again, and we'll see how that goes. I used to have a lace club, and I haven't done it for a couple of years just
Can you
because
tell me more about that?
it was too much.
What's in the club? What's happening?
So it's going to be a lace lovers club. So 3 lace patterns, and then I'm gonna do knit alongs with videos. So some technique help, and yeah. So I'm gonna put that up on my site when I get my site squared away, because I was having technical difficulties with WordPress, which always happens. So
Right.
so there's that. And
So,
then
like out of the designing, right? What's the best part for you? Like, what brings you most joy when you design something? And what's your least favorite part?
definitely the least favorite part is writing the pattern up. So yeah, I hate paperwork and stuff like that. I have fun knitting it, and I love putting out a pattern and having people like it and knit it and make it theirs. So I'm that kind of person who can never knit a pattern without changing it up somehow. So I love it when other people do that too. So it's like, oh, I love to see people who like put maybe different colors or a different weight of yarn, or maybe um, they substitute something else or try a different technique, because it's just fun for me to see that.
Right. So ask, I mean, we talked about it, but I want to ask you a little bit more about it. You are a successful designer. I mean, you are at the top of the design world. Everybody knows your name. What makes you feel that you are nobody and that nobody cares? Like what can the rest of the design world feel if you feel that way? Like what brings that hesitation, that doubt to your mind?
I think I just have a really bad case of imposter syndrome. So it's something that I've worked on all my life. So like when it's just something that's always been there. And I actually read somewhere that that some people just, think more about stuff. There are some people who are just like blissfully in the moment um and don't think about this stuff. And there are some people who are just wired that way. And I think I'm just wired that way.
So what would
So
be your advice? Okay, so like, I mean, I know so many designers, young designers who are trying to break into the industry, right? And their frustration is that there are these big names. There is Andrea Maury, Stephen West, like there's these big people who make it seem so easy, who make it seem so effortless, that everything they do is like immediately successful. Everything they do is very popular, and like the photography is great. The patterns are fun, whatever, right? And they're like, how can we make the name for ourselves? How can we break into this industry? How can we market ourselves? How can we make ourselves seen, right? What's your advice for like somebody who's just starting, who's trying to get into the scene?
wow. Um, that's difficult because I struggle with the same thing. I mean, it's hard to be seen over, like when I started out, there weren't these mega stars like this. And there wasn't really Instagram, and I actually had a few patterns out before Ravelry too. So um that's hard. I think if I had sat down and thought about it, I probably wouldn't have tried to do what I did, but I just didn't. I just did it. And I think if you make your stuff look as nice as you can, like appealing in photographs, um, you have clean design and patterns, um, then if you'll just have to start building a community. So for instance, like Andrea Mowry was around for a long time before she really became huge. So it's just like going back and not giving up. Just like keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. And at some point, you build your community and build people who like you. And you may never be an Andrea Mowry, but you don't have to be an Andrea Mowry to actually be successful. So, and the other thing is work smart. So, if you are trying to start out, don't spend more money than you're taking in. It's a business. So I think a lot of people forget that because it's actually a really enjoyable business. I mean, knitting and designing things is really fun. It's like it's a great thing to do, but also if you want to actually have a business and be able to make a living at it, you have to look at it. And you may not be able to do some of the things that you want to do. So there's that.
So when you talk about building community, how did you go about building that community? Do you remember like your number one fan at the beginning? Like was there some group of people or a person who was cheering you on through all these years and like always loves your designs? Do you have those like diehard fans?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. So when I started out, I lived in California, so in Northern California, and I used to go to Stitches West. So a lot of those people that I actually met in person and met online in different yarn groups and stuff. Like we would meet up at Stitches West and knew each other, and they cheered me on. So yeah, that was a big thing, like making those in-person connections.
Do you miss
So
that? Do you miss that like that COVID basically stopped all that
I
social scene?
really, really miss it.
So I
I
saw you
really
have
miss
this
it.
uh, s- cruise coming next year, right? In
Yes,
I was actually so excited about it. I
I
saw it.
am
I was
so
like,
excited.
that sounds like heaven.
I am just so excited. And also, I mean, for like the germaphobe that I am, they have like separate HVAC for each room and they have COVID protocols. And so I'm just like, okay, this is okay. Like
Did you
I can,
already decide what you're gonna teach there on that cruise?
we're going to do a project, and there is just room basically for 2 classes. So it's going to be just an enjoyable project that people can take with them as they're going sightseeing. So it's a Rhine River cruise, which means that basically you're never very far away from the shore. So you get to go and stop at all of the different ports, and there's lots of sightseeing. So something that won't interfere with that. It's not going to be something like really lacy and intricate, because I want people just to relax and have a great time and learn and knit together and have that sense of community.
Is
So
that why you're organizing the knit-alongs as well?
yes. Yeah. So before Zoom, I didn't even really realize, like, I didn't realize how you could really connect with people online. And so that, yeah, that's why it's like, okay, well, this is the new way to connect with people. So, yeah,
So what was the largest knit-along you organized? Like how many people participate in those?
I don't really know. I mean, because people were sort of in different groups. I had people in my Ravelry group. So, like every year, there is a mystery shawl in like around April, like March, April. And so people would basically come there. But then there were a lot of people who couldn't access Ravelry. And so there were like other groups of people. So I don't know. I mean, it's like nowhere near as big as like a Stephen West or something like that.
Right.
But if there's a core group of people who come back every year and have a great time. So yeah.
I saw this question on Facebook. So some lady from one of the groups that I'm in posted a question of asking who do you think is the knitting royalty? Do you have somebody who you like greatly admire, who you hold very high, who you I mean, not necessarily, I don't want you to think in terms of royalty, but like is there some hero in your life in the knitting community?
Who inspires me?
Yeah.
Um, there are several people who inspire me. Um, so Nora Gone really inspires me. Sandy Peters is always trying new things and coming up with fascinating new techniques and stuff. Um, Nancy Marchant, she's so cool. And Stephen West for everything that he tries differently. And then, I mean, it's really hard. I'm probably leaving a bunch of people out because um, the whole community inspires me, basically. It's
So
hard
when
to
you on
say.
okay, when you're on Instagram, right, and you have all these followers and you follow a bunch of people, like you scroll through the Instagram, what stops you? What catches your attention? Is it colors? Is it textures? Is it some new shapes? Like what usually like you find yourself stopping and looking at?
To be honest, so this sounds kind of shallow, I think, but beautiful pictures. So, like I love beautiful pictures. So when I see a beautiful picture of something, it really catches my eye. So it could be a beautiful color or a beautiful texture, but not just the color or the texture, but the photography that goes with it. So that's what really catches me. Just like, oh, that is like the composition and like the whole work as a piece of art. So there can be things that aren't great patterns, but they're shown in such a beautiful way that it just draws me in. And it's like, oh, that's just so pretty. And unfortunately, I mean, the reverse can happen too. Something can be an amazing pattern and not be shown
Right.
in a beautiful way, and it's just not as appealing. So
Is there
yeah, so I guess
something like that you always fantasize about making or designing, but it just you don't have time for it, or you think it's too complicated for people, or something stops you, but like you have this idea on the back burner?
I have a sketchbook filled with these ideas. I seriously do. So I have I have lots and lots of sketches that are just like, okay, well, until I figure out a more simple way to write the pattern and get this across, I'm not going to put it out because it would be frustrating. So I put them in my sketchbook. I kind of leave them there. I think about them. I sort of like when I'm working out in the morning, I think about how they're engineered. And if I can figure out a way to get the pattern and engineering across to people in a way that I think would be like enjoyable and not frustrating, then they make it into my designs. But yeah, it's that whole thing that goes back to it's a hobby. Like we are wearing what we knit or having it around the home or whatever, but it's also a hobby. So if it's not enjoyable, I just don't think that fulfills the hobby part of it.
Right.
So
Well, I hope that that whole book of sketches will become designs one day. I
I
wish
hope
you
so too.
absolutely the best, and I hope to meet you somewhere in one of the festivals in person one day. I would absolutely
That would be
love
so
that.
nice.
Yeah, and maybe we'll even, cruise together.
That would be really
I
fun.
love
I would like
that.
that.
Well, thank you so very much for agreeing being my guest today. I really, really enjoyed our conversation and getting to know you better. And thank you for being you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was really very cool to talk to you in person. So, I mean, as in person as possible at
Right.
the moment. I do hope we meet.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Well, thank you.